Would you marry your own brother just to keep a crown? That's not fiction. That's history. For centuries, royal families were obsessed with one thing: purity of blood. Behind the glittering palaces and gold-draped coronations were twisted family trees where queens were forced to become both wife and niece, where daughters were traded like currency, and where children were born not to live, but to preserve power. Today, we're pulling back the velvet curtain to reveal the darkest royal secrets the world tried to forget. Welcome to the true horror of royal inbreeding, a legacy of incest, madness, and genetic collapse. From empires that ruled continents to isolated families still alive today, these stories aren't just disturbing, they're real. And the woman at number one, she wasn't just the product of centuries of inbreeding. She was its biological dead end. If you're into forbidden history, royal scandals, and jaw-dropping true stories that YouTube can barely handle, you'll want to stay for this one. She was born into a kingdom that worshipped bloodlines more than it ever cared for the girls who carried them. Isabella II of Spain, reigning from 1833 to 1868, wasn't just another royal trapped by duty. She was the living result of a dynasty addicted to genetic control. Born in 1830 from a union between uncle and niece, her very existence was already steeped in whispers. And it didn't stop there. Her grandparents were also related, meaning the same names circled through her veins from both sides. Think about that. Your great-grandfather is also your grandfather. By 16, she was married off to her double-second cousin, not for love, not even for politics, but simply because he matched the royal formula. What followed was devastating: 11 pregnancies, 5 children surviving, and none believed to be her husband's. Historians whisper what couldn't be said in royal halls, that her husband, likely gay, left her emotionally stranded, forcing her into affairs just to ensure the dynasty continued. Isabella's reign collapsed in exile and disgrace, but her real tragedy wasn't political. It was genetic. This is the terrifying legacy of royal inbreeding, where queens become wombs, heirs become secrets, and history becomes a blood-soaked loop. And this is just number 10. Born into a royal house where cousin marriages weren't an accident, they were policy, Marie Louise of Austria came into the world already trapped in a genetic maze. She was the daughter of double first cousins, meaning the family tree wasn't branching out. It was folding inward. She had only 4 unique great-grandparents. For comparison, most people have 8. Let that sink in. The bloodline had been recycled so tightly, so deliberately, that it wasn't even about identity anymore. It was about replication. Marie Louise was the eldest of 12 children in a family defined by cousin marriages, and half of her siblings wouldn't survive childhood. The casualties weren't random. They were the natural consequence of a gene pool spinning in on itself. And then came the final twist. At just 18, she was forced to marry Napoleon Bonaparte, the man her father once called the destroyer of Europe. It wasn't love. It wasn't peace. It was desperation, politics, and breeding. Imagine being sent to the arms of your nation's greatest enemy just to give him a genetically royal heir. Marie Louise wasn't just a pawn. She was a vessel caught between collapsing empires and collapsing chromosomes. Royal blood may be blue, but hers ran heavy with centuries of pressure, sacrifice, and silent suffering. And we're only getting started. You thought inbreeding was a thing of the past. Think again. Lorraine Whittaker isn't just a tragic footnote in a royal history book. She's living proof that the nightmare of multi-generational inbreeding didn't die with the monarchy. It just moved into the woods. The Whittaker family of West Virginia became internet infamous after a chilling real-life documentary went viral showcasing a family so genetically entangled, even basic communication became a struggle. Lorraine stands at the center of it all. Born into a family that had been isolated and intermarrying for generations, she's not some faraway royal, she's a modern American caught in a bloodline echo chamber. And here's the twist that froze the internet. Lorraine is the mother of Timmy Whittaker, also known online as the most inbred person alive today. His story shocked millions, but Lorraine's role is the tragic foundation. She didn't choose this life she was born into, it's shaped by it and ultimately passed it on. There were no palaces, no gold, no guards at the gate. Just a genetic prison built from silence, isolation, and a cycle no one broke. Her story proves that royal bloodlines aren't the only ones that collapse in on themselves. Sometimes the most terrifying family trees grow in plain sight. And we're not even halfway down this list. She was called the Pious, but history remembers her for something far darker. Maria I of Portugal wasn't just a queen, she was the genetic endpoint of a royal experiment gone horribly wrong. Born in 1734 to King Joseph Warren of Portugal and Maria Anna Victoria of Spain, themselves part of a long dynasty of intermarried Iberian royals, Maria carried centuries of dynastic recycling in her DNA. In fact, she was the product of the 16th such cousin marriage between the Portuguese and Spanish crowns. But that wasn't the end of it. At 25, Maria sealed her fate by marrying her own uncle, Prince Pedro, a move pushed by family and tradition to preserve the purity of the House of Braganza. The result, a reign haunted by grief and unrelenting mental collapse. Half of her children died young, not by accident, but as a direct result of this collapsing gene pool. And as the pressure of leadership mounted, Maria began to unravel. By her later years, she was plagued by hallucinations, screaming fits, and religious delusions so intense her ministers ruled in her place. What they called madness was likely a tragic mix of untreated trauma and centuries of inbreeding-induced neurological decay. Maria. I wasn't just a royal gone mad, she was a living, breathing monument to how far families would go to keep power, and how deeply it could cost the women at the center of it. Her life reads like a Gothic tragedy written in blood and bourbon. Marie-Louise Elizabeth d'Orléans wasn't just born into dysfunction, she was forged in it. The daughter of Philip II, Duke of Orléans, and his illegitimate cousin herself, a child of King Louis XIV. Marie. Louise was the uneasy product of a forced union between royal shame and dynastic pressure. From the moment she drew breath, she was expected to carry the weight of family redemption. But there was no escape. As a teenager, she was married off to her cousin, Prince Charles of Berry, continuing the cycle of intermarriage that had haunted her lineage for generations. Their union brought 3 children, all of whom died in infancy. Was it the shared bloodline, or was it the heavy emotional toll that crushed her from within? Historians still debate the cause, but they agree on the descent. By age 14, Marie-Louise had already begun drinking heavily, a coping mechanism that soon spiraled into alcoholism scandal and complete psychological unraveling. She drank through pregnancies. She drank through grief. She drank until the monarchy no longer recognized its own. Her life became a cautionary tale, a royal woman born to breed, married to a cousin, and drowned by expectation. In the end, she wasn't just a princess. She was the consequence of dynastic obsession meeting mental collapse. And her story is still less horrifying than what comes next. She was born into modern royalty, a world of cameras, diplomacy, and smiling portraits, but beneath the surface, Princess Alexia of Greece carried the same ancient curse that had haunted thrones for centuries. Born in 1965 to King Constantine II of Greece and Queen Anne-Marie of Denmark, Alexia wasn't just the product of a royal marriage, she was the result of multiple layers of inbreeding still lingering in the 20th century. Her parents were second cousins, third cousins, and related twice over, locked in a tangled ancestral web that echoed back to Europe's most notorious bloodlines. Constantine himself descended from great-grandparents who were siblings, and his grandmother was the sister of his great-grandfather. These aren't distant medieval connections, these are tight genetic loops that folded inward over just a few generations. Anne-Marie, a Danish royal, brought similar lineage knots to the union. On the surface, they seemed like a loving couple, and by all accounts, they were. But love doesn't rewrite DNA. It doesn't erase genetic echo chambers created by centuries of cousin-marrying kings and queens. Princess Alexia and her siblings were partial products of that ancient code, still living in a world that pretended it had moved on. Her story reminds us that inbreeding wasn't just a historical footnote, it was still very much a royal reality. And as we climb this list, the consequences only grow darker. You've heard the name Charles II of Spain, the infamous Habsburg horror twisted by centuries of inbreeding into a king who could barely chew, walk, or think. But what if we told you he wasn't the worst? Enter Maria Antonia of Austria, A Habsburg so genetically entangled, her very existence broke the royal family tree. In fact, her coefficient of inbreeding, the scientific measure of how genetically similar your parents are, was higher than that of a child born from two full siblings. Let that sink in. Her family tree wasn't a tree at all. It was a circle, a genetic Ouroboros devouring itself through generation after generation of sibling and cousin marriages. But while Charles became a symbol of degeneration, Maria Antonia was quietly buried by history, despite being its truest mirror. She was a daughter, a wife, a mother. But more than that, she was a product of royal self-destruction, taken to its biological extreme. There were no golden portraits, no legacy of greatness, just a young woman whose bloodline had folded in on itself so many times nature could barely keep up. She is the forgotten warning that even empires with all the power in the world cannot outrun the limits of biology. And as we move into the final three, the line between royalty and tragedy vanishes completely. They never had a chance. Known only as mummies 317A and 317B, these tiny fragile remains were uncovered in the famed tomb of Tutankhamun, the boy pharaoh who ruled and died too young. But these weren't just ceremonial figures. They were his daughters, stillborn or dead in infancy, born from his marriage to his half-sister, Ankhesenamun. Let that sit for a moment. A king marries his own sister, and from that union came children whose bodies were too genetically burdened to survive. The ancient Egyptians may have believed in divine blood, but what they created was a biological tragedy sealed in gold and limestone. CT scans and modern genetic analysis confirmed what the mummies couldn't say. Both girls showed signs of congenital defects, likely caused by intense inbreeding over generations. Tutankhamun himself was born of siblings suffered from deformities and walked with a cane. His children didn't even make it that far. They were entombed beside him, unnamed, untouched by history, but they are, in many ways, the purest symbol of what happens when royal bloodlines collapse under the weight of their own obsession. These weren't queens, they weren't rulers, they were innocent lives lost to the illusion of sacred blood. And what's worse, they were never meant to live just to preserve the lie. This isn't ancient history. This isn't behind palace gates. This happened just years ago in a remote Australian valley far from thrones but haunted by the same obsession with bloodlines. Her name, Kimberly Colt, a pseudonym to protect identities, now stands as one of the most disturbing symbols of multi-generational inbreeding ever recorded. The Colt family, exposed in a series of police raids and court documents in the 2000s, shocked the world with a reality darker than most fiction. We're talking about dozens of children born from siblings, uncles, and parents, many of them unable to speak properly, some with severe deformities and cognitive disabilities. Kimberly. She was both mother and cousin, aunt and sister, trapped in a closed loop of forced silence abuse and biological fallout. Raised inside a community that rejected the outside world, she became a tragic product and perpetuator of a system that had imploded in on itself. There were no crowns, but there were rules. No kings, but plenty of control. Her story is more than shocking. It's a reminder that the horrors of inbreeding don't belong to history books. They're happening now. Not behind marble pillars, but inside broken homes hidden in plain sight. Kimberly Colt isn't royal, but her DNA carries the same scream. Forget the Cleopatra you think you know. This isn't the sultry seductress wrapped in gold and eyeliner trading whispers with Caesar beneath the moonlight. This is Cleopatra II, Thea Philopator, the true genetic climax of one of the most incestuously engineered dynasties in history. Her name may not grace Hollywood scripts, but biologically she's the most disturbing culmination of a royal bloodline obsessed with its own purity. Born to siblings descended from generations of siblings, uncles, nieces, and first cousins, Cleopatra II didn't just carry royal blood. She carried a centuries-long genetic loop knotted so tightly it was practically choking her. Her parents were brother and sister. Her grandparents also siblings. Her own siblings married each other before she seized control. She wasn't an exception. She was the rule in a dynasty where marrying outside the family was treason, and reproduction was ritualistic preservation, not love. The Ptolemaic dynasty, while Egyptian in name, was fiercely Greek, Macedonian, and they had one goal: keep their power sealed behind locked genes. And so they married each other over and over until their children began to crumble from the inside. Physical deformities, mental instability, genetic fragility. Cleopatra, too, was a queen, yes, but also a product of evolution defied a body shaped more by calculation than biology. Her bloodline wasn't sacred. It was trapped, burning from the inside like a cursed flame passed down too many hands. She ruled, she survived, but she was never free, not from politics, not from history, and not from her own DNA. In the end, she wasn't just a ruler. She was a warning that power preserved at any cost always demands its pound of flesh, and hers was paid in full. From thrones soaked in gold to homes hidden in silence, these stories expose a brutal truth. When power becomes more important than people, biology will fight back. Every woman you've seen in this list was born into a system that chose legacy over life, where love was forbidden, identity erased, and survival uncertain from the moment of conception. It's easy to look away, to call it history, to believe this level of horror is buried in the past. But it's not. Some of these families still breathe. Some of these names still reign. And the real question is, how much of our modern world is still shaped by bloodlines we refuse to question? If this journey shocked you, disturbed you, or made you think a little deeper about the cost of legacy, let it stay with you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us which story hit the hardest, or which one you think the world still isn't ready to talk about. Save this video, share it, and if you're drawn to the dark corners of history, most people are too afraid to open. You know what to do. Subscribe. We're not done yet, and neither is history.